My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
This was very eerie. Norman, put Norman up next to me, please. This was very eerie to, hear this 20 years later, this president say this. And there was clearly a point where they knew good and well, as my grandmother would say, they knew good and well that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, but they persisted anyway. I mean, Norman, what in your opinion is behind this type of madness? Certainly, President Bush is not the only one that pushes, that pushed for war and other skirmishes, and I'm using that term very lightly, that happen all over the country on a regular basis. What is it with this madness?
Well, it is madness. Martin Luther King Jr. called it the madness of militarism. Hearing and seeing Bush there a few seconds ago, it really gave me chills. And I thought immediately of a song that Phil Oakes, the great anti-war artist, really a cultural descendant of Woody Guthrie, sang. He said, it's always the old who lead us to war. It's always the young who fall. And yes, that is like an archetype. So that's sort of one way, I think, to respond to that profound question you raise. Another is that it is so profitable. Yes. These war industries are just making a killing, literally and figuratively. And every year, the budget of the Pentagon, and I don't call it a defense budget, it is a military budget. It is going through the roof. When Biden has asked for X dollars, more than 800 billion with a B dollars every year. Oh, that's not enough for the Senate and the House. They keep raising the amount, and then Biden signs it very happy, as it happens around Christmas time, the Prince of Peace. And there we are, we have the president saying how wonderful in late December every year we can sign up for more military spending.
It is insane, Norman. It is madness. It is insanity. I think the budget is 858 billion right now, give or take a few billion. And this president is asking for even more. I think up to 886 billion dollars. It is a stain on this country. We have more war power. Or excuse me, we spend more money on that type of thing than like 9 or 10 countries combined. And most of those countries in that list, countries that you and I could name, are our allies to boot. The majority in that list are our allies. So it really absolutely makes no sense. But no, there's something in the American psyche when it comes to the bravado of saying we have a strong defense. I mean, we would continue to have a strong defense, right? Evil is in the world, we get that. But why do we continue to pile onto that budget? Meanwhile, and in a very bipartisan way, but meanwhile, back in the hoods where people are misunderstood, whether they're rural, urban, or suburban hoods, we can't come together as a nation to feed our children. We can't expand the child tax credit. We can't increase the federal minimum wage. We can't pass the PRO Act. I mean, what is it about the American psyche, Norman, where the American people sit back and allow this kind of foolishness and mayhem in our name?
Big part of the problem is the media flow, that it is an overwhelming deluge, an avalanche, a waterfall that overwhelms people's psyche so often with disinformation, misinformation, and failure to speak. Aldous Huxley said that lies are powerful, but even more powerful is silence about truth. And we have these deafening instances of silence where what isn't said is so powerful and so profoundly distorting. So we don't hear the cries of people underneath the US bombs. And I was in Afghanistan, I met a 7-year-old girl who had lost her arm, courtesy of US taxpayers, because of what fell on her house before dawn. Yes, we paid for it, and they paid. Those people I met and so many others have paid for it in very terrible ways. It's so profitable. And I do think again of something Dr. King said he called a demonic suction tube, was taking billions of dollars from healthcare, education, housing in this country to bomb people overseas.
Yeah, and you and my dear Benjamin from Cold Pink, she often puts that question out there that if we pretended that it was us instead of them, how would we feel if those were our children, our mothers, our fathers, our aunts, our uncles, our grandparents? How would we feel? And there is a scripture in the Christian Bible that says something like, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but to lose his soul? And I bring that up in terms of what you said about the profit. What does it profit these industries that if we don't have a world, because we certainly cannot afford a WW3, what does it profit them if we lose the world? I mean, that's why we cannot describe this other than insanity. This is the only way. And I want to end with one of the greatest unionists and civil rights leaders of the 20th century. You probably know who I'm talking about, his quote about war. Let's put that quote up and put Norman and myself up side by side with the quote: make wars unprofitable and you make them impossible. That is coming from the great leader of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, Asa Philip Randolph. Norman, in our final minute here, what are your thoughts about what Asa Philip Randolph had to say? Make wars unprofitable and you make them impossible.
He was about organizing. And I think of him as one of the great leaders who organized the March on Washington for jobs and freedom.
Yes.
And he pushed it to the president. Folks who organized didn't ask, they demanded.
Come on.
Here in 2023, we have to keep doing that because it's our world. And it's the world of the next generations. And you used such a key word a couple of minutes ago. This is about diplomacy. But what's coming out of this administration, as before, is the opposite of diplomacy. It is bellicosity, and it is more and more war.
Yeah, and war cannot undo, war can't make things right. It just doesn't. It causes chaos and mayhem everywhere it goes, no matter what. And if you don't have a plan for diplomacy, there is no plan at all.
That's right.
Norman, we cannot wait. Would love to have you back on the show. Your book is coming out. We want people to make sure they get your book. Is coming out in June of 2023. You don't want to miss it. And Norman, again, thank you and your members for all that you do to push for freedom and justice. And we are absolutely going to have you back again. You all support Roots Action. Go to rootaction.org, baby, and support this great work.